I think so.
You are live.
Dun dun doo dun doo 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 doo.
All right, so there's some things I want to really do once you get kind of settled in your new spot,
Yeah.
and one of them is I would like to try to do like an Instagram live
Mm. Okay.
simultaneously,
Okay.
where we can just sit up through like phones and stuff. Check out that little thing. Don't you love being in a new place?
Yes. It's fun. I'm also like really jet lagged, so that's also really fun. Like I'm like really tired, but then I'm also like awake, but I'm also like really tired. So I'm wishing this coffee had a little bit more kick to it. Could use that extra shot of espresso this morning. For sure. No, that would be really cool. And I think it would be cool to do some of those other things that we talked about. So I think it'd be really cool to do some behind the beards TikToks to put on the Instagram too, and some stuff like that. So I might be able to get away with that.
Yeah, I've been looking at reels, and so there is a.
Good morning, Frodo.
Oh, it's called Headliner, and apparently, if you load your podcast into Headliner, it automatically pulls out like clips. You can program it yourself, but it will actually go through and it will give you 15, 30, 45-second clips of conversation that you can just throw onto a like an image, and then it has the voice behind it.
Huh.
So doing some little things like that.
That's kind of cool.
We'll see.
I got asked multiple times Sunday. So you still get to do that little podcast in Texas? I was like, first off, when you say little podcast, it's kind of demeaning. And two, yes, this is a personal project of mine that I have really enjoyed and that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, you'll it kind of makes me want to punch you in the beard or lack thereof,
or rip your beard off. Your beard is mine.
You're no longer worthy to wear the beard.
There could only be one beard. Highlander.
Yeah, it's good to have things that are unaffiliated at times. We need those personal spaces. So you like my hat? I don't know if you can see it.
I really can't see it because I have to have like the script and everything here on the left, and then like the screen divided, and my surface is really small, so it's like, but I see like four of us, which is really annoying. But like I wish I could that lower part of StreamYards where it has everything that's going.
Yeah.
I wish I could just mute that and have like the actual stream.
So in the bottom right, it only goes full screen. It won't go.
Right.
Yeah, I see.
Because I want to be able to see the chat too.
Right.
With our one live viewer.
Well, this cap is from the San Antonio Missions.
Okay. Is it a sandal?
It is. It's a flip flop, a sandal,
a thong.
The minor league baseball, I think they're AA, San Antonio Missions, but they have a Copa Diversion, which is basically the fun league in there, and so they have alternate names that they wear for about half the year.
Really?
And they're all like Latino oriented. And so San Antonio's Copa Diversion team is the Flying Chanclas or the Flying Sandals. And so
that's awesome.
I was like, oh, it's got to happen. I have to have one of those.
That's awesome.
It was a birthday gift from my wife. So very cool.
That is cool.
Till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for a beard.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This
Good
is
morning.
Behind the Beards. And on Behind the Beards, we pull the curtain back, take a look behind the scenes, and do our best to reveal the things that you need to know about your ministers and your ministry leaders. I'm Joshua Fowler, a preaching minister, still in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Wow.
I know. My partner
Congrats.
here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. A man in transition, now officially in transition, right?
I
Aaron
am
Bartlow.
almost like jobless, you could almost say, but not really. So yeah, we're in transition. We're moving to Texas, but we are taking this week. There was a bit of confusion with a lot of people at our old church, Central. That's weird to say, because they're like, "Well, have a safe drive to Texas tomorrow," and I was like, "Oh well, I'm not going." Yeah, thank you. So we flew to Oregon. I'm going to actually officiate my my aunt who passed away memorial service today. I'm very honored to do that. But you're laughing at the cuckoo clock,
not cuckoo clock. I'm sorry,
not at the funeral. It's a little rude. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry.
So we're gonna. I get to do that today. I was honored to do that. But then we're taking this week also as, and actually really fits with what our topic is today. So this is kind of crazy. But we're gonna take this week. Lauren and I are, and we did last night. We prayed, and we're gonna be prayerful for this whole week to kind of recharge and reset our batteries and refocus us. Man, it is so emotionally tolling, and there's a lot of hooks left in you when leaving your congregation and going to another congregation. And so we're going to try to, it's not necessarily like bad healing or like because of anything bad, but try to, recenter and refocus ourselves so that we can walk into Pine Tree rested and ready to serve and kind of do what we need to do. So it's kind of like a workcation. So we are focusing and trying to, I'm working on a vision guide for the year. I'm going to work on a couple meetings that I want to put together as soon as I get there. The youth group has no social media presence. So creating a social media platform for that entire youth group over, 3 different social medias and getting those going. So that kind of stuff. But so I am actually in Oregon. I am a true millennial. I lived with my in-laws for the last 3 weeks, and now I'm in my parents' house for this 10 days. So check that off the box.
That's right. You've come full circle. But that's your native land, right? The Pacific Northwest.
It is, but we're gonna lose a lot of viewers, but I don't miss it. I do love Oregon and everything great about it, but it is what it is. I have really enjoyed the Midwest. I think I'm gonna really enjoy Texas. So
you will. In fact, when you get to Texas, you'll no longer be from the Pacific Northwest. You'll be from Texas.
Yes, I'll just get claimed.
That's right. If you've ever lived in Texas, you are always from Texas. At least that's how we Texans think.
That's how we think.
I haven't lived in Texas since I was 18 years old, but I still call myself a Texan. So
I think Lauren's afraid that I'm going to pick up a draw. I have a bad habit of picking up accents. We had a preaching intern, and he was from France, and when I after I'd hung out with him all day, I would have a little bit of a French English accent, and Lauren would be like, "Why are you talking that way?" So I'm not really worried about Sam picking up a draw, but I probably will. So
howdy, y'all. It's good to see you. Although they don't really talk like that in East Texas, so it won't be too bad.
So
they're a little citified there in East Texas. Don't tell your people I said that, but no,
we'll edit that part out.
That's right. That's right. The power of post. The power of post. No, I'm super not excited for why you're up there, but I know it's good just to have some space to decompress, to process everything that has transpired, and then to prepare to move forward. That is not something that that I'm really very good about.
Mm.
The rest, we were talking, about the need for rest,
Hmm.
and sometimes we confuse rest and sleep.
Oh yeah,
That
totally.
that man, I'll sleep for not often, but sometimes if I have a day off, maybe the kids are out of school, I can't sleep past 9 o'clock, or else I wake up with a terrible, terrible headache, and I just feel awful all day. But we'll turn in early, or we'll watch a movie, and I'll fall asleep like at 9 or 9:30, and then get up and go to bed, and I'll sleep all night. So you end up with like 10 or 11 hours of sleep, and you wake up, and like mentally, it's just like I don't feel rested. I know I slept a ton, but I just don't feel rested.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's this important distinction, that it's not just about going to sleep on time, but there's something really, really important. And this is true whether you're in ministry, in church work, even in secular work. There's a real need that we have to just be rested. You ever had those moments where you like slept forever and woke up and felt like you just went to sleep?
So like right now, from jet lag. So when you were talking about that, like it really makes me think about that whole idea. This whole like, when I'm done with a lock-in, like I'm really tired, and then I sleep till about noon. From 8 to noon, and then I wake up and like I'm really tired. But that's like easy to like reset. So it's not really rest that I'm craving. It's more sleep. But after June and July for youth ministry, we try to go on vacation in August, and I'm craving that rest that comes with that. I'm craving. I love people are like, well, you always go to Oregon and then you always go camping. Like, is that fun? Like, you're sleeping in a tent. And I'm like, I get to turn my phone off, and I get to be with my family. I get to be with Sam. I get to be with Lauren, and I disconnect from everything. And we're singing songs, and we're having biblical discussions, and reading our Bibles, and doing this kind of stuff that our family enjoys doing, and playing games. And yeah, you just, I crave that rest because I've been going nonstop. And yeah, throughout the year, I find myself going, man, I need to take like 2 days. I need to take a day at the least and find God in the midst of all of this. And I need to find this peace, this rest that comes from that. Because I do, like, I'll get overwhelmed and overtired because it's all about what can I do, and keeping things going.
Yeah, and it's not always like the first place I go in my mind when I think about rest is I think about escape.
Yeah.
I've got to get out of this
Mhm.
setting. I've got to get out of this moment, or not even the moment, but I've got to get out of this environment. Jody has a day, where she's off of school this week, and we'll probably just take the top off the Jeep and we'll drive out to Fontainebleau, which is on the side of the Pontchartrain, and just throw up some hammocks, hang out over the lake for a little while. And so I think about that. I think about going out to the beach, because the beach for us is not very far away, and just spending a day on the beach in the sun. You could use your phone there, but you can't see your phone very well, so it's really not
Right.
that great. I can't take my computer. There's too much sand. Wouldn't want to lug it around anyway. And so it kind of has this forced getaway. Or I think about going up into the mountains and going skiing or going hiking. And so it's frequently about escape.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important thing. Escape. That's right. It's an important aspect of rest. But I think when we always think about that escapist mentality, I think we miss a really, really important part of rest, which is the ability to just take yourself out of the moment.
Right.
And have those, sometimes it's just momentary moments of just, okay, nope, I've got to take a minute. I need to recenter. Maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's 30, maybe it's an hour, but it's here. in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of
Mhm.
the hustle and bustle of life, and to be able to just allow whatever it is that I've been doing to kind of sink in and to process.
Yeah,
And maybe it's more about
absolutely.
processing than it is about rest. I'm not sure, but
For me, it's
um,
about putting in that time and that work of okay, so sometimes for me, this is not always, but sometimes for me, rest comes with, am I taking care of myself? Am I taking care of, because when I was in college, it was so funny. I thought this professor was like, just, it's funny when you think you know more than somebody, and then you realize, man, I just don't know anything. But I don't even remember who it was, but this professor, it was like in our ministry Bible class, because we were all ministry majors, right? And he said to us, he said, "Hey, you need to make sure that you're staying on top of your personal devotions, your personal reading your Bible life." He says, because you're going to get to a place where you're taking 3 or 4 Bible classes a semester. So you're reading the Bible all the time, but you're reading it for class. You're reading it for a test. You're reading it for this. But you won't be reading it for you and for personal growth, and hearing what God is trying to tell you in that sense. And I was like, yeah, right. Like, no way. Like, if you're dwelling in God's word and you're doing this, and he was like, right. And like, you find yourself in a place, and I was like, man, I haven't just like read my Bible to like listen to God for a long time. I've read my Bible because, I have to read it for Old Testament, and that becomes like the same thing in work here. Like, I read my Bible almost every day, but it's because I'm teaching class on Sunday. I'm doing a class on Wednesday. I've got a church camp that's coming up, and I'm preparing for that. I'm preparing a memorial service, so I'm reading God's word in order to gain inspiration of ways to work God into this time. But have I stopped and have I read God's word, for me, or is it all just about work? And so being able to stop and pause and say, okay, this is about my spiritual health. This is about my cup being filled by God. And I think I find myself in that place quite often where I need rest is translated to me as I need to fill my cup with God. You know, one more thing, real quick. I well, one more thing is that I was just thinking about this the other day. Is like, I never get to go to church.
Mhm.
And like sometimes people don't get this. Like, I never get to go to church. When I go to church, I'm working, right? I'm working, and even if I'm not preaching, like even the Sundays that I'm not preaching, we didn't have Bible class for a little bit while, but we had in-person service. I'm working. I am that guy that's looking around. I'm trying to see who's here. Who am I going to talk to afterwards? Who am I going to check in with? Make sure they're doing okay. Hey, was the song service going well? Hey, did somebody stand up for that prayer? Do I need to go and be there? Did somebody show up? All these kind of things are working all the time, right? And then you put like teaching Bible class and everything on top of that on Sunday. And so you're like, okay, I've got X amount. So like, I'm working on Sunday mornings. And then same thing for Wednesday nights. And so, and then people are like, well, but you get to go on like mission trip. And when you go on mission trip, you go to churches there. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm managing the youth group and all of these kids everywhere, And so it's like, I never get to just go to church. And so like, we were just presented with this opportunity at Pine Tree about taking a sabbatical Sunday once a quarter to go into worship at another congregation, maybe have lunch with that minister afterwards, and then kind of talk about your experience after. And I was like, that is the most valuable thing that you could have offered me, because what you're telling me is, hey, we want to make sure you cover all of your stuff so that it goes off without a flaw, because that's responsible. But then we want you to be able to worship and truly be able to worship. And do exactly what you say. And so Frodo nails it here, right? Like, John, I don't know if you like being called Frodo, but I always say that instead of Jonathan. But yeah, it's hard to focus on worship when you're in charge of things. And not even just like in charge of things, but I feel like even just being like the youth minister I guess that would be in charge of things, but I was thinking like in charge of worship.
Yeah, it's definitely in charge of things. And the truth is, it doesn't matter in what capacity you're there. They know who you are.
Yes.
And because they know who you are, there's a different expectation, and even a different responsibility that we have. Sometimes that's conferred on us by other people. Sometimes we assume that people have an expectation that they don't have. And maybe sometimes our expectations of ourselves are even heavier than what other people put on us, because we understand the importance of what it is that we're called to do.
Well, it was like that thing. I just saw that ping pong ball challenge. You've seen that before, where it's like, parents have this many hours in ping pong balls with their kids, and ministers have this amount of time, and there's such a little bit of time. So then, like, when we go to church or we have these things, like, that's my little bit of time, and I can't squander that. I can't waste that. I've got to take every opportunity that I see, because I don't have that many, and so that builds into that cup being drained and drained and drained, and me not filling it with that worship, with that God time.
Well, and what's really pointed, and one of the things when I kind of mentioned this to you about this episode this morning was,
last week when we planned this episode.
That's right, exactly.
Not
last
this morning.
week, not this morning. Tuesday rolls by in a hurry, man. I'm going to tell you,
it does. Sneaks up on you.
We just got into Hebrews in my daily Bible reading. I've got a group of friends and acquaintances that we're in a little YouVersion group. So we just got into Hebrews, but we just came out of Leviticus. And, Leviticus is a hard read. But when you go from Leviticus to Hebrews, it makes Hebrews really pop differently. When you're talking about Jesus as the great high priest and the fulfillment of all the law and the sacrifices and all these things, because you've just read about them. But Leviticus ends with this command for rest, and he talks about the Sabbath. And it's all about, every seventh year the land lies fallow, and then you have the Jubilee, and every 50 years you have this reset. He talks about the Sabbath, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. God rested on the seventh day. And so there is created in us this deep, deep need to just stop for a moment and be still, be at rest. And I think maybe we take that for granted a lot. We recognize, Jesus often seems like, he feeds the 5,000, and what does he do immediately? He goes up in the hill to pray and rest. He finds places early in the morning to go and rest. He is always taking that time to go away, to be alone, and to be still. And I just don't know if we understand. We know that it's important, but do we understand that it is created as a part of our DNA to crave that, and we don't function well without it?
Yeah, quoting my own sermons to me. So thanks for that.
Oh yeah, my bad. I hate it when that happens.
I hate it when that happens.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, you're completely right. So, did you happen to see that Christian Chronicle article that came out this last week?
You were telling me about it, but I have not seen it.
It is. It was pretty interesting. It was pretty powerful for me to just kind of read, and it's mainly powerful to me not because of like. It had this really strong message, but it gives that sense of unity to me. It also, like, I enjoy reading articles about youth ministry, and I go, yes, they're doing it too, or it's happening to them as well. You know what I mean? That's what I really love about the National Conference of Youth Ministry is you get around a table and people like start talking about youth ministry, and they're like, do you have this problem? And you're like, yes. Oh, I thought it was only me or my group, and it's like, oh no, it's like everybody. So there was a quote in here. I had it. Now I don't know where it is. But anyway, he talked about He said he's not saying that service projects and summer camps and mission trips south of the U.S. border are bad. In fact, he's eager to resume them all things. But he wants to give his teens and their families and himself time to breathe. We were giving them things to do all the time, but not necessarily having quality things come out of it. He said, I was just overworked and overscheduled. And that was Drew Denman. And that's in that Christian Chronicle article. And boy, when I read that, I felt my heart get pricked. And I was like, that's exactly how I felt. Like just overwhelmed with how much stuff we're doing just to do stuff. And that idea of just having stuff and doing stuff instead of focusing on quality. So it was just kind of like really interesting. And that idea of being able to, I guess what I really liked about that quote was that idea of I just wanted to give them, and I just wanted to give myself a place or a time to breathe. And that was like, that's the most important thing is when we talk about rest, I think there's a moment where you just have to take like a big breath. Like, what do we say when somebody's really upset? Okay, take a deep breath. Take a breath, you know. If you get punched in the stomach, what do you need? Take a deep breath, you know, try to get your breathing back. All of these kind of things. And so we need to do that in our lives as well, and especially for rest. And so, like, am I sad that, I'm here for my aunt's memorial service? Well, I am. But I also feel outrageously blessed from God to be given this gift of a week where my wife and I can breathe in the chaos of moving. And if you've never moved across state lines, it is chaotic. You know, I cannot tell you how stressful and trusting in God it was, but how stressful it is to sell your house in 6 hours, call a realtor, get a hotel, go down to where you're going to move, look at houses for 2 days, realize on the first day that none of those houses were acceptable to live in, and have the fear in your head, if I don't find the house tomorrow, I don't know where we're going to live in 30 days when we're supposed to be down there working.
Right.
You know, and what does that mean? What does that look like? What's it going to do? You know? And so to be able to like legitimately, it's like I've been holding my breath, crossing all my T's, dotting all my I's, getting everything ready. All these emotional conversations, everything, like it's just draining to be here this week and just to breathe, spend the first part of the week praying for Central, thanking God for all the blessings that he has given us at Central, and then spending the second half of the week praying for Pine Tree, praying for us, praying for what does it look like starting a new ministry job in year 2 of COVID, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And so being able to like legitimately take that breath, like I just don't feel like I get those opportunities very often where you get to take a breath. I think COVID was a giant, I think 2020, yeah, you could list all the garbage that went on and how hard it was for us. But sometimes I kind of think it was God like karate chopping us in the throat and go, breathe.
In the beard.
In the beard. Yeah. Well, my beard protects my neck. So all 3 of them. So, you know, and so like, yeah, taking that breath.
If we know that we're created for it, if we know that it's important, if we know,
see it's an example from the beginning.
Why is it so hard to sit in, right? That's the question. When all this stuff first started a year ago,
isn't that crazy?
Everyone went into lockdown mode, and everyone looked around, and almost without fail, what did they say? Our lives are too busy.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Look at the time I can spend with my family now. Look at the things that I'm able to do, the conversations I'm able to have, the closeness. And and the kind of intimacy that we are now able to create in this margin that we has now been created by a little virus.
Yeah.
And we recognize that. And we also recognize how much of a value gathering together as a Christian community was. We had taken for granted our families, we had taken for granted our time, and we had taken for granted our church gatherings. We recognized that right off, and we sat in that. And we sat in that for a little while. But how long did it take before people started saying, when are we going back to normal? When are we going back to normal? When are things going to be normal again?
Yeah.
Like it was not very long. You know, the basketball March Madness tournament got canceled. The NBA season got canceled or pushed back. The NFL season became threatened, and everyone said, okay, we can't live like this. It's too quiet. I have too much room to think. I think that's what went on. Because in that space, in that point of rest, in that margin, you really have to confront some things in your own life, in your own mind, in your own heart that maybe we're just not willing to confront. And our culture has told us, hey, you know how to solve that? Just get busy. In fact, successful people are busy. And the busier you are, the more successful you look, the more sports your kids play, the more balanced and well-rounded he will be. And he will just be all things to all people. And I think Satan has used a lot of godly kind of motives to fill our lives outside of the church with to fill our lives outside of the church with that kind of mentality, and we've allowed it to creep into the church to where now, as a minister, if I'm going to be a successful minister, I'm keeping my people busy.
Yes.
There's a project every week. There's an event every week. This week it's for the youth, and we have a service project. And next week it's with the older group that we have. And with this week it's with the singles, and with the next week it's with the college. But we're always going. And these families have points of contact in each of those groups. So now our culture and our communities are keeping them busy. Their schools are keeping them busy. Their activities are keeping them busy. And as a church, we're like, yeah, we'll contribute to that.
We want a piece of that too. Yeah.
And it just becomes this chaotic point of life that we've grown comfortable in the chaos.
Yeah.
And we are uncomfortable in rest. And
you're setting this up perfectly. This is like, Josh is like, you have to trust me, okay? This is like a 2-minute commercial that I really want to play because it plays into this. And when this was like in 2016 by Christopher Waltz, and it was a Samsung Galaxy Note commercial, and it made me like not want to buy a Samsung, but it made me like really sad when I watched this. Do you remember this commercial?
If it was for Samsung, I probably ignored it.
Okay. Can you hear this?
I don't understand you.
Yes.
Always working all the time, busy. Now you have this Galaxy Note 7, so you can do even more. Really? You already multitask so much. It's just like regular tasking at this point.
You never take vacation, but even if you do, you can't help but work.
You get more done before 8 a.m. than the rest of the world, and we're hours ahead of you. Curricula was not enough, so you had to create extracurricular.
Ryan,
Nice picture.
you're never happy just winning something.
Yeah, world record. You're only happy winning everything. But what has that tireless ambition ever gotten you, America? Yeah, you built your own country from nothing. And yes, you're responsible for modern democracy. Oh, it's kind of a big one.
And yes, sure, you're the greatest, most influential nation in the world, where dreams come true.
Hey, Chris, working hard or hardly working?
Both, neighbor. Thanks to the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 with S Pen. perfect for busy Americans like us.
It unlocks with my eyes.
Do more.
So I watched this video, right? And for me, it did not have the effect that I think that they wanted. Because I watched that first part, and yeah, he lists some like really great things about like our culture. You know, hey, we're responsible for these, you know, some of these things. We can claim those.
Mm-hmm.
But like everything else just made me like super sad. Like you weren't busy enough, so you created extracurricular. You know, when you do go on vacation, you are working. You know, for me, when I watched that, I was like, you know, and then you have him, you know, as a woman holding the baby on the phone on the bicycle. He was like, you are already multitasking, so now it's just kind of like regular tasking.
Regular tasking, right?
And like I don't know, does that resonate with you? What's your blind reaction?
It does not resonate me. It haunts me. It haunts me because I don't want to say I've been that person, because in many cases I still am that person.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember laughing at, you know, some students when I went back to Oklahoma Christian. I showed up, it was in Greek 1, and I was in Giger's class, and we're sitting there, and it was in James, because we had to write a paper on the book of James, an introduction to James. And I had written a paper, and I mean, these guys were like, "Oh, I didn't have time." I was like, "Don't tell me you didn't have time," you know. And they're like, "What?" And I say, "Look, I got home from class. I picked up my son from school. As soon as we got home from school, I took my daughter to gymnastics and dropped her off at the gym. I came back. I picked up my other son, and we went to baseball practice. After baseball practice, my youngest had a game, and we went to a game. Then we got home, and I had to feed my kids and my family dinner. And so we ate dinner, and then I had to speak to my wife. And so then after my wife went to bed, then at 11 o'clock last night, I had a chance to sit down and do the homework. So don't tell me you didn't have time to do this thing last night."
Listen, I had to watch the whole first season of The Office. Okay, so
right. But it's this badge of honor.
Right.
Oh, you think you're busy? I'm busier. And we wear it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And because culture has told us the busier you are, the more successful you are. And we've so allowed that to come into our Christianity that has completely abandoned a God that says, "Be still and know that I am God." And that doesn't mean that we aren't active. It doesn't mean that we don't have to go do things. But it does mean that in the very beginning, God commanded his people to stop and rest. You may not work on the Sabbath. That is my day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not my day because God needs us to give him a day. It's God's day because he knows that if we're left to our own devices, we will consume every minute we have with fleshly things.
Mm-hmm.
He says, look, you need a day to just be still. You need a day that's devoted to rest, to recovery, and ultimately to rest in him, you know, and to give him that day as a little piece of holiness. So, man, it's so tough, and it's hard for us. Here's the hard thing for me as a minister. I see it in my people. I see it in myself. I have to work really, really hard to see how is my ministry creating this environment in others, and to create a ministry to the church and to the people that gives them what they need, that inspires them to be better and to be more for God, but doesn't perpetuate this culture of chaos. That's the real challenging part for me.
Right. Well, and this may be a good place to kind of like slow down and shut off the podcast for today, because it kind of plays into that idea that we might be able to talk about next week, which is like, where do we find our self-worth? You know, we this is a message that we are currently, you know, preaching to our teens and to our church members. You know, where do you find your self-worth? You know, and of course, our answer is we find our self-worth in God's love for us. And we say that, but do we really mean and believe that? You know, do I find my self-worth by all the things that I'm doing, by all the accomplishments that I have made. You know, do you do your effectiveness of a youth program by the amount of teens that showed up, or about the relationships that were built and strengthened because of that event? Those are some really tough and really good questions for us to meditate and really dwell and think on. And some that I've even sat in an elder's room, and I just talked about an amazing mission trip that we just did. I talked about the devotional settings in which we got to study God's word and that we got to praise and we got to sing. There's something about working all day in the sun for other people, eating good food, and then like being like that kind of like really tired, but then finding that perfect place with your youth group and singing worship songs and having a small devotional. That is the sweetest devotional ever, because you're tired and your barriers and your walls are down, and so you're just there to worship God, and you're just there to like soak in his goodness and give you the strength for the next day. And I've sat in that room and I've explained that and what went on and those relationships and those moments that these kids are going to remember forever. And I've had somebody turn to me and say, yeah, but were you excited that you had 9 kids go out of the 45 you have on roster? And I sit there and I go, yes. Like, did you not just hear what I'm talking about? Those 9 kids that went just had this amazing experience. And I want you now to go talk to them and ask them about that. Give them that opportunity to share this with you, the kind of idea, And so where do we find our self-worth? And if we are not finding our self-worth truly in God, then when are we going to be able to stop and breathe and rest? Because we are trying to prove ourselves that we're effective, that we're useful. See if I can get the right word out. And all those
I want to be
things,
useful
right?
too.
Yeah. So do I. As I get older, my back hurts more and more. So, so I don't know. Maybe I just like hit a crazy left field, out of bounds ball. Sports,
No.
love it.
I think, that's right. No, I think that's it, and it is a whole nother conversation, to look at that. And it's, it's a good time. We have, when you have church online, everybody's looking at analytics, everybody's looking at views, everybody's looking at all of these things. It's like, where do you find your value? Where do you find your identity? Where do you find your worth? This isn't really a behind the beards moment, but Jonathan just says, in all seriousness, it's become obvious how much we took things for granted. I want personally to go back to those first few weeks, and I want to take us back as a church, back to those first few weeks when we remembered and realized how much we were missing out on because of the chaos. And I want us to find a way to capture that. And even though it's really uncomfortable, when you realize what actually needs to change in order to capitalize on that margin, to lean into that discomfort and really ask what is most important.
Yeah.
What do I want to be the priority of my life, of my children's life, of my church's life, of life? And at the first sign of discomfort, to not just run back to what we know.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like a drug addict who they go into recovery, and while they're in recovery, they're great. They go through detox, everything's feeling good, and then they get out of the recovery house and they get back into real life, and they realize the real world is still the terrible place it was that I left.
Yeah.
And making things right and doing things the right way is really, really hard. But I know all the people that got me into the mess before, and they know me and they love me, and they don't even ask questions about where I've been. And so I'm just going to fall back into those old habits because it's easy and it's familiar, even though it's terrible for me and it's destroying me.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that's what we've done is, okay, I'm aware we were unhealthy. We needed to make some changes. Oh, that's what changes look like? I'm not sure I'm up for that kind of work. Let's just go back to what we know. And yeah, I know it's destroying me. And now I know we're rotting from the inside out. Yes, I know our relationships are deteriorating at rapid paces, but it's comfortable.
Yeah, but I know it.
And it's right. And the world thinks I'm successful.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I have a place and I know where my place is. And we've got to be willing just to lean into that discomfort and say, I'm willing to be uncomfortable because it's going to be better for me in the long run. And it's the way God created me to be.
It's like that song, My Chains Are Gone. I've been set free. And really living in that freedom that Christ and God has really given us in all things. And living in that freedom. I mean, like living in that freedom to be able to rest and to be able to have that. It's powerful.
Yeah. So maybe that is a behind the beers moment. I don't know. It's not really about ministry.
I think it's
about Christianity. So,
well, I know. Yeah. Ooh, this just turned into a ministry podcast. Crazy. Yeah, I think the behind the beers moment is we're all really busy. I think in all honesty, like if I'm going to give you a true behind the beard moment, it's this. If I'm the average day churchgoer person, realize that your minister struggles with this just as much as you do. That you're busy, you feel like you're pulled in all directions, and a minister feels like that too. And we feel an obligation to try to just slide in one more thing because, of what we are told and what we know is really important, which is, our Christianity. And we're told, we know that putting God first is what we're supposed to do. And so we try to do what we can so that you can have these opportunities to truly make God first in your life. But sometimes we fall short in the fact that we just add too much stuff, and all those kind of things. But we are also struggling with that. We're struggling not with putting God first, but slowing down and taking those moments of rest. There's just this, it's not just like the church needs to realize this, the elders or the deacons or the ministers. It's we all need to have this realization. We all need to hit this hard reset and really change the culture, right? Like we've got to be countercultural. I think if the church ever looks like the normal world, we've missed it.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways, we're missing it because we're trying to fit this cultural cookie cutter. But change can't happen just from the ministers. Can't just happen from the shepherds. It has to happen for the entire flock to have their this idea and to go with it. And we all have to be countercultural. So that's what I have to say about that. So we want to thank you guys for being here today. We appreciate you and we love you. And we want to hear your guys' opinions. So you can check all over our podcast here. We've got social media links. We have email links, everything like that. Please reach out to us and let us know. Maybe there's a question that you want to talk about, you want us to talk about on the show and things like that. Send those to us. We are happy and excited to look those over. We do respond. So that's kind of a cool thing. So hit us up, reach out to us. That would be really great. But we also want to remind you of this, Galatians 6:9. Don't grow weary in doing good. Okay. That's the number one thing we really want you to remember. And that's what we want to remember in this podcast, because this world is messy and life is messy. So let's allow Christ to use us to do something different, something good in his name. I'm Aaron, and this is Josh, and we will see you next week on Behind the Beards.
Till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for a beard.